But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Peter and ask him to tell us a bit about the SAFE program and set the scene for translating theory into action.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks for that introduction. Thanks to Maureen, Naomi, and the team for inviting me today. It's a great privilege to open the session for this year. And I'm going to be talking about the SAFE program. And I start with a quote from Eric Hornagel, who's really a leader in resilience engineering. And his quote is very apt to where we are and what we're trying to do. It's the ability of a system to sustain required operations under expected and unexpected conditions. And it's safety, the most important thing is safety is what we do every day. It's not something we do when we have a clinical incident. Now, the SAFE program, and historically, let me tell you about it. In 2013, I was asked to write an editorial for the BMJ Quality and Safety on a program on huddles that was reported from Cincinnati Children, in which they showed that by increasing situation awareness and using the huddle as the vehicle, they could decrease unplanned admissions to the intensive care. That means children weren't deteriorating and been having to admit it to the intensive care, and they decreased it quite phenomenally. So I looked at the program and I said, this is something I'd like to try. And the Health Foundation was having a program called Co-Producing Patient Safety. And so I applied, I got a grant and put together a coalition of 12 hospitals in the United Kingdom, and mainly in England, actually, 6 children's hospitals, Great Ormond Street, Liverpool, Manchester, etc., across the country, and then 6 pediatric wards, which would be in district general hospitals, which are like most of the hospitals in Ireland outside the children's hospitals. And so we put together this coalition to test the theory, and we had funding also from WellChild, so we could involve parents involved in the situation. And over 2 years, we trained, firstly we had 12, but after the first year, the results were so phenomenal that what happened is that we were approached by many other hospitals to come, and eventually we had 50 hospitals across England that did this program. And then I was working in Ireland, so I brought the idea to Ireland. I've taken to Australia, Argentina, etc., that you can really look at making safety what we do every day. Just remember that quote. We want safety to be done what we do every day, not when we have a clinical incident. So really what we are looking at is moving from reaction, which is when an incident occurs, which is the way patient safety has been designed in the past, to anticipation, predicting what is going to happen, and going proactively to manage risk. So these are very things, moving from reaction to proactive risk management. And I recommend that you read Vincent and Alberti. They wrote a paper on managing risk proactively. That's what a safety system does. Unfortunately, healthcare, when it set up patient safety, set up an incident management system, which they called by mistake risk management. It's not managing risk after the event. That is managing incidents. This is managing risk before the event, and this is what this program is about. So these are the areas of patient safety that I put that are the key proactive patient safety system, from individual responsibility to learning how to be resilient, they call it safety 2, to incident management, very important part, what we can learn from that, to how we understand how systems work and the human factors within the system, to developing a system of reliability, to having situation awareness of what's going on in real time. That means everyone has a shared understanding of what's going on in real time, and then constantly learning. As you can see, this is a cycle. It's not one or the other. This is what we have to do every day. So what we have done over the 7 years of this program, from the time I started in 2014 to the time in 2022, that's 8 years of experience of running this program with different teams. We have continually refined it so that this system can be done in real time by clinical teams in a day-to-day work, where safety becomes the way they work, not something they do when they have a clinical incident. And they don't hear about human factors. They just learn how to do it. So this is taking the what into the how. Another quote from Holnager, which I like, is that the variability that caused the clinical incident in one day is the same variability blamed for the accident the next day. So for doing job safety on one day, the nurse or doctor does exactly the same thing the next day and saves a patient, and they get accepted. One time they say, oh, what has gone wrong? Other time, what went right? So really what we really look to first thing is building resilience. And so this resilience is built by looking at the human face of safety, the people who are doing safety and looking for the power of positive deviance. And so we ask clinical teams straight away to ask what are they doing well on a day-to-day basis. You might have seen the Learning from Excellence program, which is part of this. It's building resilience within the system. So people are constantly saying, this is what we've done well. What are the good catches? Not looking for the near misses, but the good catches, rather than have the negative into positive. So that's the very first thing we teach on the program, how they can do this in their day-to-day work. And I can tell you, it's a cultural thing in Ireland, maybe also in England, not to boast about what you do well. And I've had nurses say, but that's part of my job. I say, well, I want to know how well you're doing your job every day, because if you build up reserves of resilience, then what's going to happen? It's going to be very easy to go forward. The second thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the kind of risk you have. And now you've got your resilience. We say, analyze the risk. This comes from the book by Safer Healthcare. And so some parts of our work have to be ultra safe. Blood transfusion, for example, ultra safe. Most of us work in this reliability where we have procedures and we want to know how reliable we are in applying those procedures. But sometimes we have to be highly adaptive. For example, if you're in the labor ward and a patient has a sudden deterioration, a woman has a sudden deterioration or shoulder dystocia, you don't want to go just by the book. You want to be adaptive and change and adapt to the situation. Likewise in the ED. So we say they've got to constantly say where are they working? Which type of safety are they doing? Nuclear power, firefighting, or climbing Mount Everest. So that's what they've had to look at the whole time. And you can see on the bottom the different levels of safety from very unsafe to ultra safe. And I'll come back to that. So this is what we teach them. The first thing, what is the harms where you work? The harms in the pediatrics are different from the harms in labor ward, which are different from the harms in ED. And they have to identify the harms because that's what they're going to try to prevent. Not only deterioration, but the harms. In care of the elderly, do people fall pressure ulcers, delirium, etc. The next one we teach them is the idea of systems thinking. And I use the SEEPS model, System Engineering Initiative for Patient Safety from Pascal Carrion. And it builds on the systems and processes outcome from Donna Bedian. So we teach teams how to understand their work system, who the people are, that is the staff they have, the skills the staff have, how the staff feel, the human factors of the staff, as well as the patients. Who are the patients at that time, the people in them? What tasks have to be done, and can everyone do the task? So if you get a new nurse who's on bank or can she do or he do the task done? What equipment do they need? The technology, do they have the right equipment? Does the equipment change? Variability. What's the environment like, particularly for example, environments, if a person is on a trolley in the ED, the environment's not good for safety. So what's the environment like, and then how do we organize ourselves? They then look at the clinical processes that have to happen and how we do them. That's the way we do work. And all of this leads either to desired or undesired outcomes. So we teach this complex human factors approach in a very simple way that can be adapted every day. So every morning, the charge nurse and the consultant will say, what's our work system looking like today? And have we been keeping reliably to the processes? So this is what they do there. Then we teach them the reliability theory, again, very complex, but we make it simple. We say to them, you have to look at the smallest errors. You have to listen to the people in the front line and their perspectives. You have to learn and you have to make decision making in the front line. And so the huddle is actually the vehicle that they apply this. where the frontline staff are making decisions and it's not made from somewhere and they're looking at what's going on in real time. So that's the reliability part. And that's how we get teams to be highly reliable. They're constantly asking, are we doing what we've agreed to do? And if not, why not? You're allowed to vary, but why not? So the last few slides is what happens, the situation awareness. This comes really is creating the worldview is that everyone on the team has the same shared understanding. It's about gathering information, understanding what that means, and then anticipating what will happen, predicting who will deteriorate in the next shift, who is likely to fall, who is more at risk of a pressure ulcer. And that perception, comprehension, and projection gets to decisions, action being taken, and going around again. So that's the theory. How does it work in practice? This is a huddle. What happens? So what happens, you first identify, and we ask the house officer, the doctor, trainee doctor, or the doctor in the working ward, and the bedside nurse to look at what's in that red box. Is the IMUs, or IPUs rising? Are there any family concerns? Is the person on high-risk medications that you don't normally use? So sometimes they're on high risk, but they normally use it. But in high risk, they don't normally use. Is the patient not getting better? Sometimes they say stable. They're supposed to get better or they're getting worse. If they're stable, they're not getting better. Are there communication issues? They don't speak English, or more than one clinical team? Is the person in the wrong bed? Shouldn't be on my ward, should be in a surgical ward or a ward for a gynecology ward. Often have women patients who shouldn't be there. And finally, this concept of watchers. Is there something going on we can't really look at on vital signs? They bring that to the mitigation, which is the huddle, which is the registrar, key staff. I couldn't put it on the slide, too many staff, physios, OTs, pharmacists, whoever's important. At Royal Free, they brought a school teacher, they brought a dinner lady, anyone who could bring information to share views with the ward manager, who's the conductor with the consultant of the whole process. From that, they will go to escalate or mitigate. So this is the huddle process, and this is what we teach them. And Sinead is going to show you exactly how it works at Bantry. So to put it together, this is the Vincent model, where they start. What did we do well? Past harm, reliability, sensitive to operations, the anticipation part, and then the learning with after action reviews, and then they go the cycle again. Let's do the cycle. And we teach teams to start it once a day in the morning, because we know once they're done in the morning, in the afternoon, they're going to say, we want to do it again. And once they're going to night staff are going to say, we want it as well. And that's how it spreads. And every team, we don't tell them what they must put in each of these boxes. We say, these are the principles in your area. What kind of harm do you get? And now you can manage it in real time, not in past time. So every day they said, did someone fall yesterday? Someone fell. Well, what do we need to do to prevent someone falling tomorrow or the rest of the day? And that then becomes good practice. And they start saying, that's what's done well. No one's fallen. That is building resilience. And finally, what we do on the program, and that's all the other things that they're doing, improvements and mitigation. Finally, what we're doing, we are moving teams up this ladder, which comes from James Reason, of the culture of safety. At the start of the program, we get the clinical teams to do the Manchester Patient Safety Scale, and most teams are somewhere between reactive and systematic. The tipping point for psychological safety is when systematic to proactive, anticipating and preventing problems before they come. And that is exactly where we are going to make sure that people are moving up the scale. And the results we show, because they start the journey at the beginning, reactive, systematic. When we do it at the end, teams are moving up from systematic to proactive, and then safety becomes their business. So that's the story. And Sinead and the team from Bantry, I'm so pleased that they are here, are going to show us exactly how it works in practice. And please ask questions and I will answer after that. Thanks a lot. Over to you, John and Sinead.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to the QP Talk Time for inviting Bantry Hospital to facilitate in this meeting. It's a great honour for the SAFE team and it's a great honour for the hospital, so thank you for having us. So I suppose to start, it's probably easier if we could probably play the video if that's possible, Naomi, and I'll speak after it.
Have we sound coming through there?
I don't have any sound yet on this, no.
Naomi, have we sound, or is there any way we can?
No, I mean, the sound is on negative at the bottom, yeah.
Past time, we are more safe aware. We are integrating and sharing information so that deterioration can be anticipated. Lessons are being learned, and the safety huddles initially started in MAU at 3:30. Now they are operational on weekdays throughout the hospital at an agreed time of 4 p.m. These huddles aim to escalate any concerns or patients with high IUs. Either a plan of escalation is agreed or decisions are made to transfer to a higher level of care. We use the identify, mitigate, and escalate approach. Let's now survey on the whiteboard as performed in MAU, and here are the results. We also ask for suggestions to make the board and the huddle better. Here are the results of an audit performed since the introduction of the safety huddles. Our challenges can be summarised as the 4 C's: the COVID-19 pandemic, the cyber attack, continuity as in sustaining the change that we've initiated, and capturing the data. Our hopes for the future involve the introduction of a 9-duty huddle throughout the hospital, formation of a more structured cardiac arrest team, and sustaining the culture of shared learning amongst the MDT.
Thank you, Naomi. So I might just go back to the previous slide if that's okay, Naomi. Or I can start, it's fine. So hi everyone. So yes, so my name is Sinead O'Neill, and just unfortunately my SAFE team just isn't available with me today. But I suppose everything that I'm presenting is highlights probably a collaborative effort within the hospital. So a lot of the data that I'm going to generate today on slides for you has been generated from the medical assessment unit and has been also generated from the high dependency unit. So I'll just show you the first slide, if that's okay, Naomi, when you're ready. So this first slide is just showing what we were hoping probably to get across on the video there while ago to you, but just apologies for the audio disturbance. So this first one is our first phase. So we started the safety huddles in we started the safety process in September of 2020. So we were up and going on safety huddles roughly around maybe December of 2020. In that particular time, we were actually incredibly busy as well with COVID. So it was probably good timing from that point of view. So initially we have 2 phases in our hospital. So phase 1 was when the safety huddles were implemented into the medical assessment unit. So they started Monday to Friday and 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. in the evening time. So within 3 to 4 months of being up and going on safety huddles, what we were able to do was we were able to start capturing what we call our watchers. And Peter has earlier identified what classifies as a watcher. So what we looked at was patients that were being transferred into our high dependency unit. And typically before our safety huddle, while there would have been conversations, and Mark mentions it in our videos, probably between the nursing and the doctors group, we just weren't on the same pages. So sometimes when the patients deteriorated, there was probably more of a reaction as opposed to an anticipation phase really with us. So when we started into our safety huddles, as you can see from the graph, it actually had an immediate effect. 92% of who went into our HDU around the 3 to 4 months of starting safety huddles were identified as watchers. So 7% of those patients were in the department, but we just didn't pick them up in the safety huddles. Unfortunately for us, I suppose what we became very aware of is that 50% of our admissions into our medical assessment unit come in after 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the evening. So then they were never given the opportunity to be put on the watcher list. So their escalation at night time again became more of a reactive phase. So if we move into the next slide, Naomi, when you're ready. So phase 2 is where we're currently at the moment. Now, I'm always very suspicious of a graph that puts up 100% because I think at this stage in healthcare, I don't think any of us really expect, well, we hope for 100%, but it's very rare that we do hit 100%. But I suppose what I'm after putting up is very honest data. It's November just gone. I just randomly pulled down a month, and it's November of 2021 I've pulled. So this highlights phase 2 of the medical assessment unit. So at the moment, we very successfully have run out a 7-day of a week, 24 hours of the day. We do safety huddles. So definitely one occurs during the day, a structured one with the whole team, and then a second one again occurs at night time, again with the nurses in the medical assessment unit and with the NCHD group. I suppose, yeah, so in November when I looked at the data, all patients that went into the high dependency unit in our month just gone in November, 100% of those had been captured as a watcher status in the medical assessment unit, and we had no adverse events in the department in the month of November. I suppose in every month I capture data, and there are occasions, it just happens to be November, that is probably looking very favourable at 100%. The lowest we've probably come to is probably about 95, 96% in the last 6 months. So I hope by this slide you can see that we are making every effort to sustain the practice, and that that's reflecting in our escalation then into the high dependency unit. So then our next slide is phase 2 of the wards. Now, while this probably looks like an unfavourable slide, to me this is probably one that as a SAFE team we're probably most proud of. So this reflects the activity on the wards, and what we started doing after looking at the medical assessment unit, we started looking at patients who transfer from the wards down to the high dependency unit. And again, I suppose what it was highlighted when we began our SAFE journey was that again we were more in the reaction phase as opposed to the predicting phase. So, and again, this is the month of November. So in the month of November, the patients that transferred down to the high dependency unit, 75% of those patients were actually identified on the safety huddle as watchers. The 25% when I actually went to audit, I suppose ideally or initially I would have probably considered capturing these as adverse events. But when I actually audited the individual charts, I think to be very fair to the team on the medical ward, I think what I became very aware of was that they actually didn't justify to be highlighted as watchers during the day. They actually just genuinely deteriorated during the night. And I suppose we are in a hospital and we do see sick patients, and patients do become unwell and then very fast they're well again. Or alternatively, in this case, they were very well during the day. And when I say very well, they weren't flagging on their iNews. There was no concerns voiced from the nursing team or from the MDT team that went on the safety huddles with me those days. And just unfortunately for those patients, they just deteriorated at night time. When I looked a little bit closer into the patients, these patients that transferred down to the high dependency unit that we hadn't marked as a watcher, I probably realised the values of the iNews and the escalation, because it was actually both of those things that actually escalated their care down to the high dependency unit, and then they were appropriately A, escalated, and then B, appropriately managed down in the high dependency unit. The patients that actually transferred down, all of those actually made a full recovery, even the ones that weren't considered the watchers during the daytime from us. So this is probably a slide that when you look at it visually, you mightn't be that happy with it, but me personally, I'm quite happy with this slide, as are our SAFE team down here in Bantry. So then our next slide is probably more of a broader view. So when we began our SAFE huddles in September of 2020 and began the SAFE process in September of 2020, we then at the end of the year just did a cardiac arrest audit on the cardiac arrests that were in-house cardiac arrests within the hospital. So I excluded everybody that came from an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest and only looked at the ones that probably deteriorated and subsequently went into the cardiac arrests within the wards. And in the year of 2020, we had 13 cardiac arrests. And to the best of my knowledge from the data that I have available to me at the moment, we're down at 5 for the year of 2021. So I suppose this probably on a more of a broader view probably points very much. The only thing that changed really was, I suppose, the safety huddles and the safe approach. People just became more aware. I think we started to come onto the one page. We safety huddled together, and when you safety huddle together, you're far more faster to share information. And I suppose there may be other factors. We also implemented the iNews version 2. Lots of these things, I'm sure, had a very positive impact on the patients within the hospital and increased our awareness of subsequent deterioration and how to escalate them appropriately. So I suppose this is the main slide that probably I just will finish on, and that's our process so far within the hospital, and that's where we are. So thank you.
Well, Sinead, that's super. Thank you very much for sharing your experience there in Bantry, and thank you, Peter, for such an excellent overview. I think of you know, both safety theory, I think, been brought to life, but also, you know, very specifically this intervention. And Sinead, can I ask you, you know, what was the thing you would say, having done this as a team and as a group, that you've learned? You know, what's the thing that you didn't know before that you've learned now about safety?
I suppose that within the hospital, everybody is probably safe aware, but just not safe aware together. And I suppose we address problems, or we tend to address problems once a problem has occurred. Whereas I suppose by having the support of the SAFE team, it probably brought us more to the page what Peter speaks about, how you start to put in processes and how you start to anticipate. I'm sure, like, when you actually speak to a nurse by themselves or you speak to an NCHD by themselves, they both can flag concern and deterioration, but sometimes we're just not doing it at the same time. So I suppose the big thing is that while I always say we're all roughly on the same book, but we just weren't on the same page. That's probably how I'd probably best word it. And I think definitely the SAFE approach has certainly brought us to a large percentage down here on Bantry to the same page.
That's great. And when you say coming onto the same page, who's coming onto the same page? Is it kind of within disciplines or across disciplines, would you say, that SAFE is working at, or both?
I suppose it's both. I suppose sometimes there's probably people who are logged on today who are probably actively under the present SAFE team at the moment, and hopefully there's many more who are considering to do this in September. And I suppose what I probably would say is, while yes, we are considered a very rural, remote hospital down here in Bantry, but I suppose the challenges that we experience here are very similar to challenges that would be in other hospitals, far bigger than here, but equally we're all moving in the same direction and we're all struggling in the same things. And I suppose sometimes a lot of people will think that, you know, there's just too much of a challenge to undertake something like this. But I suppose one very favourable thing happened, and sometimes people would describe it as luck, but it's not necessarily luck. It's really, if you just invest the time in the SAFE, we'd planned, or we'd rolled out phase 2 of the SAFE process within the hospital. And on one of our very early SAFE huddles out on the medical ward, it's just a very competent and capable nurse just came to myself and the team that were huddling at the time and just wanted to flag a lady who earlier wasn't noosing at all. So she was doing quite well. She was making a full recovery in hospital from something like a pneumonia, but she just triggered on safety huddle time at 3:30. The nurse came up and just said, "I'm not that sure what's going on," but she said, "You did tell me to come and say if I'm not happy with somebody." She said her iNews is 2. She said, I can't really put my finger on it, but she said, I just know that she's just not right. And subsequently, that safety huddle went in. We assessed the lady at the bedside. The NCHD took the lead. She equally said, I'm not that sure, but she just listened probably to the nurse. She probably felt clinically that probably the lady was very well and we could observe her, but just based on the fact that the nurse was saying she knew her with the last few days, she was making a steady recovery and just had started to flag a little bit just that afternoon. It was really just her respiratory rate alone. That was the only single thing that was triggering. So the lady went for a chest x-ray and it actually just showed that she had a pneumothorax. And I suppose the lady subsequently had appropriate interventions and equal to that made a full recovery and was discharged home. But to me personally, I think that was probably our turning point, particularly for the safety huddle on that ward. I just think for the nurse herself, even though she's a very experienced and very competent nurse, I think it just gave her great confidence that it's okay not to know. We don't need to be able to diagnose. We just need to know when somebody's not right. It's the gut instinct. It's what Evelyn Casey responds to the whole time on the iNews, and it's just keep it simple and don't overcomplicate it, and that's what SAFE is about. I think you'll never be ready completely to start SAFE. Like there will be loads of reasons why you won't start your huddle, and this word isn't ready, and that word isn't ready, or your huddle script isn't ready. But it can do no harm, and if you just start somewhere, it can only get better. It'll never let you down. That's what we've certainly experienced down here in Bantry.
Oh, that's super, Sinead, and thank you. You've given us stories and data today, and it's lovely to get the two of them together. Peter, can I ask you the same question? You know, you've done SAFE now for several years, and you've done it, you know, around the world. What have you learned doing this program?
Yes, so firstly, I learned it's about people. I think so, and that, I mean that's why I should listen to Sinead. It gives me so much joy. What it is, it's about the people providing care and the people receiving care. That's what our lives are about. We're in the people business. And one of the things that I've learned is that most of us in healthcare think everything's reactive. We think that we are so busy, people come in, we can't predict what's going on. The only time we can't predict, the only time is if someone arrives in the ED and collapses right in front of us. We couldn't predict that. But once they're in the hospital, they can predict. And we were very fortunate in this program with the funding from Aveline and her team at DIP. They wanted to do the iNews, and this married so well because the iNews is about, it's not about prediction, it's about allowing you to predict. Allowing you to predict. It's a tool that allows you to predict. And so receiving the funding from ONMSD and DIP allowed us to apply this theory to the tool, which was based on prediction, but how do they get people to predict? So the key thing is doing exactly what Sinead did, empowering a nurse to say, I have a feeling that something's wrong. The vital signs are normal, but there is something going on. That comes from other industries where it's common. It's not common in healthcare. So we are giving people the psychological safety in order to be able to raise their game and say, I think we need to listen. We flatten the hierarchy. That's what I've learned. You have to flatten the hierarchy. There is a hierarchy, but it's flat. In that huddle, everyone's viewpoint is important. And when I was at Great Ormond Street and at Royal Free, and we introduced it, Royal Free was where I first tested it, then Great Ormond Street. We had young people, children and young people saying, I'm not feeling that great. And that going to the huddle where they're feeling, and it's really listening to people. So John, what I've learned is that patient safety is too technical. Achieving patient safety is about looking after the people and giving them the chance to do it. And Sinead's story there is just about that.
Super. I think one of the things that comes out of the SAFE program is identifying the key processes that need to happen, and one of those processes obviously is that it's not just one discipline, you know, and that's often seen as being nursing kind of that's there with the patient. It's everyone, and getting the voices and and the eyes of everyone. How do you do that? And I'm going to ask you both that. I mean, Peter, kind of maybe on a kind of big scale, view, but Sinead, might ask you first, Sinead. Then, how did you do that in Bantry?
Yeah, so I think the key is in the initial SAFE team. I think I was probably very blessed with Sandra, who was representing the high dependency unit, and then Mark, who was representing the consultants and the NCHD group. And I've worked in hospitals where there can be resistance, and at times there would be resistance, but it's not resistance, it's probably just a change in habit. And sometimes people aren't good to change, or they feel that where they are at the moment is probably working. I suppose the nice thing is the safety huddles was something new. So people didn't come with a negative experience of it. It was probably just an uncomfortableness that people had at standing at the board. But something I stole from a college actually when I was doing a course, it's like Vegas rules and the law of assumption, that really what goes on in the safety huddle, it is a safe place, and you have to recognize that everybody that comes to the board, it's not an ideal time. There's never going to be a good time to stand in front of a whiteboard as a group of people, because there's always something else that we could be doing. So everyone that comes to the board is coming to the board to offer up their time. And I suppose everybody's opinion and everybody's voice is respected. Certainly, though, I suppose the foundations is getting your SAFE team right. Mark certainly took the lead from the consultant point of view in the NCHD. So much so that every Friday evening now, one consultant comes to me and asks me before he leaves what patients belong to him or on the watcher list for the ward for the weekends. And some other consultants will actually say something like, can I put a patient on the watcher list? Or it just becomes a terminology that we start to talk about. And it
So
doesn't
you've
really
changed
matter
the
what
language. You've changed the language that you speak around safety. Do you think?
I'm not too sure. Do we change it, or do we introduce a language that just
Okay,
everybody seems to understand, is probably how I'd put it. So thank
super.
you.
And Peter, the same question to you. I mean, what are the tips for that multidisciplinary involvement?
Yeah, so first, I just want to comment on the language, because we actually wrote a paper on the change of language, in which we looked at huddles and recorded them over a period, and we saw the language change, and language reflects your culture. So as the language is changing, so the culture of safety is changing. And that's what Sinead's talking about. First of all, it's all about value. I can say if you want to get multidisciplinary teams, it's about value. So you have to make it worth the while of the person coming to attend. And what the value is that their lives will be either easier in carrying out their jobs, their patients will be safer, they'll know what's going on. Often when I spoke to nurses, they'll say, now we know what the doctors are thinking. We never knew because we used to do our rounds, they did their rounds. Now we know what they think, and they know what we think. Once I introduced it on they did it on intensive care, and they had one for the allied professionals, for the physios, the OTs, the pharmacists on intensive care, who would say going on a ward round was a waste of time for them because the doctor spoke doctor stuff the whole time, and at the end they said, oh, they need physio. So they said, rather than have a huddle, just so we can discuss our concerns, value. So it's all about making it valuable to the people. So for the consultants and the house officers, and we always insist we start off the core, nurse manager and consultant. That's the core. They bring their troops along, the nurses and the doctors. So that's the core. The next layers come all the other professionals that support the team. And that we don't say who it should be, we say who on your ward may be able to contribute something about a raising situation awareness. So for example, if you're on a ward in which a surgical ward, I would include people like porters who take people back and forth from theatre, because they observe things that we don't observe. On a children's ward, I'd include the school teacher and a dinner lady, because they observe things often. Usually, if you're on a care where people are there for a longer time and the families are with them, I would talk to the dinner ladies who talk to the families, and they tell them things that they don't tell the nurses, they don't tell the doctors. So we say to them, who's going to add value to the huddle and who can you add value to their work, and then sell it about the value. And the value for the patient, of course, is they're going to be safer because everyone knows who may deteriorate, who may fall. We don't say it's all. Look, a lot of the work we're doing with iNews is to ensure we can decrease deterioration. And I know that we have saved many lives this way. We haven't, the teams have, by predicting, just like Sinead's story. We know we get lots of these stories, but also it's about determining the harms on your ward, and particularly in care of the elderly wards and pediatric, who is going to fall. And a porter will say something like this: when I was taking patient X or Mrs. X to X-rays, I noticed that she had difficulty getting into the chair. Okay, something that the doctors wouldn't have seen because the doctor comes in and they're lying in the bed. That's
so
the kind of
those little things that maybe we don't hear. Yeah.
Yeah, the small items, that's what you want. And it all adds value. So for the multidisciplinary team, make sure it's worth their while. And the other thing is, we say the huddle is not a handover. It's not a ward round. It's an identification of what could go wrong. On the Vincent model, that is the ward manager and the consultants go around that very quickly. And in their huddles, they all have a script, just to say. The first part of the program is they develop the script for their area. They share it they share scripts, they get ideas, but the script is what they're going to do. And in the script, they have the Vincent model as it applies to their unit. So it'll be different for a surgical, to a medical, to an obstetric ward. They'll all be slightly different, but they all have the same theory within it.
Fantastic. Just one last kind of very quick, because I'm afraid we're running out of time. You know, a lot of the things we talked about are the technical things, I suppose, of the processes of doing this. But it sounds like, kind of from what Sinead's talking about and what you're talking about, Peter, is that we are also influencing safety culture here in a big way, and perhaps even shaping and forming it. Do you think that's an important outcome of this program?
Sinead, do you want to start, and I'll go after
Well,
you?
let Sinead answer that first. Sinead, do you think kind of the safety culture, I suppose, the attitudes and beliefs and practices that people have changed in Bantry because of the program?
I certainly think that they have. Like I actually probably left out one small important bit of information, that when we rolled initially on the medical ward and we implemented the safety huddles in our safe team, we probably just went with the NCHD group, the healthcare attendants and the nurses. But actually, remarkably, when the physiotherapy team were actually on the ward and they would overhear you talking about oxygen and new oxygen requirements, um, without an invitation, they kind of started to probe and wonder, could they be involved in it? So I just think it's something that's all probably like an infection. It almost spreads, but in a very positive way, like as opposed to the pandemic that we're in at the moment. But yeah, it's something that I think, as long as you just try your best and recognize that it never stops and it will always evolve and you can always be better and do better. But to be doing anything is probably a good thing at the moment.
Super.
As well.
Well, we'll have to check in with you and hear how that story is going. Peter, last word to you then about culture. Do you think?
Yeah. Look, John,
changing culture.
This is all about changing culture. Remember, I started to saying from Holnagel, safety is what we do every day, and you can only do it every day if that's in your culture, that you do it. That you come in and start the day saying who's at the highest risk, who can we predict what's going to happen. And I tell you, most of our work is predictable. I really believe we can. I saw in the chat box just something about undergraduate training.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I do not think we do that. I don't think we have adequate patient safety training. I think that what this program does, it takes away the risk management of incidents into the management of good practice. Because the first day, everyone is saying, what have we done well? How many people fell? No one fell. That's great. Have a celebration. people feel good. We're building their psychological safety so the nurse, like Sinead said, feels confident to come and say, I don't know what's really going on, but something is. So yes, that is a change of culture. That's a demonstration. So yes, and I really encourage teams to join us on the next program. I'm sure you're going to show that a slide later.
Yeah, so the next program I think is in September, and I think teams can contact Evelyn Casey, and I think that's in the chat there, or the DPIP. So yeah, look, thank you both so much. We could keep going, and I think you know, from the chat there's some lovely comments, lovely questions, great feedback for Sinead and the team in Bantry, and also for Peter and the program at RCPI, and for the support that's come from Evelyn. I've got to wrap up, folks. So just a quick shout out to a couple of things. Please register yourselves on our QPS Ireland network map. The link is there, and please let us know where you are, and you'll also be able to learn about people who are in your neighborhood and around you and interested in doing the same work. Next slide there. Yeah, and equally, you know, to join and become part of our Q community in Ireland. Again, a great way to connect with people in Ireland, but also to collect with fellow improvers across the UK as well. And I hope, you know, now that things are settling, you're going to see the Q community maybe becoming a bit more active again in terms of having events and getting back together. And you can contact Caroline Lennon-Nally. And finally, folks, just to put in your diaries, I hope you've enjoyed today's webinar, but I think we've got 2 further great webinars coming up over the next fortnights. So on the 15th of February, we have Bernie O'Reilly and Mary Cregan from Patients for Patient Safety Ireland. And then on the 1st of March, Mila Whelan, Anne Lawler and Nicola Williams, National Patient Forum, on talking about partnering with patients. So put those in. I think they'll go very nicely together as a pair of events, and I think I look forward to seeing you on that. So that's all for me. Thank you once more to all of our backroom team. So to Naomi, to Maureen, to Shima, and a special thanks again to Peter and to Sinead, and we'll see you shortly in a few weeks' time. Please don't forget to fill out your feedback. We do take your feedback on board and try to make our webinars better each time, and see you in 2 weeks' time.
John, could I actually apologize?
Sinead, yeah.
Just cutting. No, it's just, I suppose it's just something small. It's just that I probably was going to say I'd massively advocate for the safe experience for next September. Don't wait until September to register for it, because having people like probably Peter and Rachel McDonald who steered that group as well, but equal to that, for me, it probably put me in contact with people like Evelyn Casey and other hospitals, which are very supportive. But I suppose the only thing is that, speaking on behalf of the SAFE team, I'd probably just like to massively acknowledge my colleagues here in Bantry Hospital as well. Like, it's possible for me to generate data like the way I did for PowerPoint presentation with you, and that is a collaborative approach really, and that's outside our immediate SAFE team. That's everybody in the hospital probably working together, but certainly there are loads of people who, by you completing out the SAFE program, who you will have links with, and they're almost like forever friends on a professional level that are greatly supportive to you and in new projects. So thank you, and thank you to everyone.
Thanks, Sinead. Sorry, go on, Peter.
John, just to say, we're celebrating next week the end of the current one, and we're bringing all the teams together if they can to see how well they're doing. So if anyone wants to see that, they can see it in action. Thanks.
Sorry, so safety is a team sport, and I think there's lots of players on this team, and it's great to see so many of them here today. And thank you to our audience, and see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you, John. Thanks, sir.